on this edition of Southern Newsweek. The annual shortage of accommodation for workers in Wanaka returns with no vacancy signs popping up. The demolition of the former Cadbury factory in Dunedin is well underway and has uncovered some local history. And Invercargill youngsters help create a very colourful mural for Matariki. Kia ora, I'm Melissa Barton. Workers' accommodation is at a pinch in central Otago, with locals saying it's an ongoing problem which isn't being addressed. While a couple of residents in Wanaka and Queenstown feel fortunate to have found places to live, a cinema owner remembers living rough when he first arrived in Wanaka.
The no vacancy signs are once again out in force in central Otago, with accommodation for seasonal workers stretched to capacity. Queenstown resident Dre Hart says he's lucky to have found accommodation, but says it won't be easy for people heading to Central to work this winter season.
So personally for me in Queenstown, it was quite easy. We had viewing straight away, but I'd been looking over at Wanaka just out of curiosity, and it is an absolute nightmare. Like talking to friends and talking to other people. I also had a quick look online and there would have been 40 to 50 listings available in Queenstown, whereas in Wanaka there was just one property on the whole site that had just been listed.
The annual problem wasn't an issue last year, with tourism shut down due to the global COVID-19 pandemic. However, over in Wanaka, Dave Thorn also feels fortunate to have found somewhere to live.
I know one of our team members for our new business, the Kiwi Artisan Co., was really struggling to find anywhere to live. So she ended up, I think, applying via a flat share with some friends and things like that. But I know she would have gone to about 50 or put in about 50 applications for whatever was available in Wanaka, and yeah, I think they all came up short, ended up flat sharing. But everyone wants to live down near town, near the lake, and they just need to move to Hawe because Hawe is beautiful.
A long-term Wanaka resident and City Councillor Callum McLeod recalls it was a problem when he arrived in Wanaka with his wife around 40 years ago.
Andrea and I got here in 1989 and we spent 2 months in a tent in Hawe flat for May and June. We eventually found a place which we had to move out of for 2 weeks while the family came down and went on a skiing holiday. It's been a recurring theme. I think this year it's slightly worse. Because we've got such an influx of tourists from Australia, putting pressure on the Airbnb network, and people, if they can get $150 a night, why would they get $150 a week?
McLeod is also the proprietor of Wanaka's Cinema Paradiso and says the annual issue needs to be addressed on a national level.
And it's something that we need to work towards a discussion with major employers and council to find a positive solution.
Councillor McLeod says something needs to be done. In central Otago, the South Today.
A recently completed fishing jetty in Otago has now been officially named. Port Otago completed the structure 2 years ago and has decided to name it the Warren Lewis Fishing Jetty after a local man who was one of the project's main instigators.
Friends of Otago Harbour and also of Warren Lewis gathered at Port Chalmers' Boiler Point for the official naming of a fishing jetty that's been about 2 decades in the planning.
Probably 22 years of rattling the sabre, starting from the resource consent hearings, trying to convince people, if we put a wharf up, we can actually get Port Otago to build it, and then we get a bit more people on their side, because port development's been pretty contentious, those for and those against.
The jetty was built by Port Otago and completed 2 years ago. The port decided to name it in Lewis's honour, as he was one of the most iconic and dogged supporters of creating a wharf for the public to enjoy.
Family's been here since 1865 or thereabouts, and lived on the harbour, earned a living on the harbour, fished commercially in the harbour, recreation on the harbour. I'm passionate about recreational fishing. I'm passionate about the water quality in the harbour. But I'm also passionate about the public to have a spot to go fishing and enjoy themselves.
A keen recreational fisherman himself, Lewis says it's a good spot to reel in a wide range of sea creatures.
They catch everything here, from kingfish, trevally, warrahau, blue cod, the odd crayfish, the odd shark. They catch everything here.
In addition to the wharf, new public toilets and a walkway have also been added to the area. In Dunedin, the South Today.
While it may not be very visible to the public from the outside, workers are almost halfway through demolishing Dunedin's former Cadbury factory. A number of diggers and cranes are hard at work, clearing the site from the inside out, with archaeologists already gaining new details of the factory's history.
A team of about 20 staff from the Christchurch Demolition Company series are about halfway through levelling the disused Cadbury factory to make way for Dunedin's new $1.5 billion hospital. While archaeologists have not yet begun examining the ground underneath the already demolished parts of the former factory complex, they've already found a treasure trove of 16 books containing the business records of the original biscuit and confectionery firm that was founded by Richard Hudson in 1899.
It starts with Richard Hudson. It moves into the era of the Six Sons, which is, we'll probably know, it's well known as when his six sons took over. But then it moves into the when they joined forces with Cadbury and Fry's, overseas companies, and moves forward even as it moves towards becoming part of Schweppes. I think that's one of the last records in the book. It's in the 1980s.
Archaeologist Megan Lawrence says the books provide records and dates for events such as when the factory's horse stables were phased out and motor vehicles were purchased by the company, potentially giving new insights into a bygone era.
Some of them go through in chronological order, like this one starts at 1899 and moves forward from there, and the books overlap as well, and it's a really interesting study for someone to do in the future, to go through and do a really detailed analysis of what we can get out of these books.
While the complex's exterior walls are likely to be toppled in the next month and a half, the removal of the landmark Cadbury silos is set to take a little longer. So far, more than 8,000 tonnes of material has been removed from the site of the future hospital, with more than 80% being recycled. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Fluorescent paint flowed in a squiggle art workshop held at the Invercargill Public Library recently. The resulting glow-in-the-dark paintings are to go on display as part of upcoming celebrations of the Māori New Year.
Budding artists used the stars and Maori culture as an inspiration for a mural to be exhibited during this year's midwinter celebrations. Those who attended the workshop at Invercargill City Library were guided through their squiggle art session by local artist Steve Chernyshov.
It's a combination of art therapy and explaining what Matariki, the Māori New Year, is all about. And we started off with a discussion where we talk about what Matariki means and tried to figure out key words that we can then draw, and we've drawn a lot of key words, like for example I do believe this might be a taniwha, and then we've used scissors to cut out the shapes and then overlaid them onto the picture down here, and then we've tried to draw around the shapes and add paint and colour, and especially fluoro art, so we've got paint that glows in the dark.
Using paint that will fluoresce under UV light, the squiggle art was about incorporating various ideas on the Maori New Year in a spontaneous way.
Sort of to relax within yourself and try to express yourself without feeling like you're pressured to try and perform or make something that's really, like coherent. So it's allowed to be abstract, and the kids have just let go and just painted these.
The glow-in-the-dark paintings are set to be exhibited early next month in conjunction with other Matariki celebrations around Southland. In Invercargill, the South Today.
After the break on Southern Newsweek, a new eatery opens dedicated to the humble potato, and we have a sneak peek behind the scenes of the Invercargill Rotary book sale before the public was allowed in. So see you after the break. Welcome back. A University of Otago dietetics graduate has set out to make a common carbohydrate a healthy option for Dunedin diners. After a year of planning, Usher Dunedin opened her Turkish street food style jacket potato restaurant Patate on George Street.
Combining health food with Turkish fast food and the humble spud.
In Turkey we have a street food called kumpir. It's basically the UK jacket potato but taken to a whole new level where we mix the potato in with our cheese and butter, making it really fluffy and hot, and we top it with a whole variety of toppings so it becomes a bit more of a stuffed potato than a jacket.
24-year-old University of Otago dietetics graduate Usher Dunedin is using her knowledge of healthy eating along with her passion for her homeland. Using agria potatoes from 3 local suppliers, Dunedin admits starchy carbohydrates aren't usually recommended by dietitians.
So one of my main goals as a dietitian is to show people that healthy eating doesn't have to be restrictive, complicated, or expensive. I'd really like to allow people to be able to eat affordable and nutritious food, and if I can be a part of that, that would be great.
She was also helped by receiving a scholarship from Startup Dunedin. 2 accountants from Paulson Higgs donated their facilitator fees to help Dunedin recoup some of her startup costs.
They helped me a lot. They even gave me what they called a reverse scholarship for my business idea. So, I got to walk away with a lot of knowledge and a little bit of cash, so that was nice. And just people that will kind of always be there if I've got any questions.
Last year she participated in the Startup Dunedin Co-Starters program and says she received a wealth of knowledge. The 9-week program guided her through the aspects of building a business plan.
A lot of old business people who have had businesses for a long time, and they all gave us so much advice, so definitely very useful.
Her ideas have been around for about a year. She took COVID-19 operating restrictions into account when designing both the business model and the way the restaurant is set out, including having a window to serve out of on George Street, should COVID-19 restrictions come back into place. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Invercargill Rotary's 40th annual fundraising book sale took place recently. Our South Today reporter was able to browse the range of books on display at the Civic Theatre before doors opened to kick off the 4-day event.
After missing out on last year due to COVID-19, the annual Invercargill Rotary Club book sale is back with between 30 and 50,000 second-hand books filling the Civic Theatre. Organiser Richard Russell says this year's selection of material is excellent.
I suppose the major part of the sale is the paperback fiction area, but this year we've got a lot more on New Zealand as a country, and we've been overwhelmed by the amount of good quality books coming in for the children's section.
Russell attributes the supply of great reads in part to people downsizing their collections.
I think during the year I've noticed that more people are probably going into rest homes, some of the older population, and we've got a lot more stock from people's estates. Rather than destroying them, they're giving them to us to recycle.
It's hoped this year's sale will raise about $40,000 in funds to go to the community and the Southland Medical Foundation, although there are some costs involved.
I'd just like to, acknowledge the support of the community, because without the support of the community this wouldn't be being held, and it wouldn't have been held over 40 years either. And we'd also like to acknowledge the support of some of our sponsors, and in particular petrol stations of the province who actually put themselves out to be a collection point for our stock.
The second-hand book sale is set to run until Sunday. In Invercargill, the South Today.
A Dunedin-based petrol station manager has won big with his magic show in Auckland recently. Magician Jonathan Usher won several awards at the Magician event, including the top prize for the best cabaret act of the evening.
Jonathan Usher is back from a magician's convention in Auckland, where he won 3 of the 6 awards on offer, including a trophy for the best act in the evening cabaret show.
I just do a comedy show, so I do magic with rope and cards and whiteboards. I just did some fun stuff. I only had 12 minutes, so 12 minutes to have a bit of fun with the audience and then get out of there.
Usher says he's surprised at his success in the recent convention.
It's the only prize I've had. I've never entered a magic competition in my life, so that was pretty exciting.
The magician juggles his time between managing over a dozen petrol stations across the south and travelling with his box of tricks to perform several hundred magic shows a year. Due to COVID-19, he's had some time away from the stage, but he's put that spare time to good use.
When COVID hit last year, I lost a few shows just with conferences cancelling and those sorts of things. And obviously I had 3 months off, but that was actually really cool because I got to learn some new tricks in that time, and it's actually come back pretty strongly, I have to say. I'm not upset about where my magic career is right at the moment.
Jonathan Usher is set to perform at Dunedin's Law Courts in 3 weeks' time. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Last year, a huge whisky still was lowered through the roof of Speight's Brewery in Dunedin. Owned by an Oamaru-based company, the still is now being run by a Dunedin man who started off as a 16-year-old working for Wilson's Distillery in North Dunedin.
Dunedin man Cyril Yates spends a couple of days a week making whisky with the new stills that were craned into Dunedin's Speight's Brewery last May. The huge stills are owned by the Oamaru-based New Zealand Whisky Collection, for whom Yates started working after about 20 years away from the distilling business.
I worked at Wilson Distillers from 1974 as a 16-year-old right up to 1995 when they actually shut down. So I started off painting barrels outside for about 1 year, and after that I was asked if I could go into the shift system and work inside, which I did, and I started crushing barley. I did that for 2 to 3 years, and then I actually went and mashed barley, and then I went on to distillation and I became a stillman.
Yates says he's enjoying the process of working with Dunedin's biggest whisky still.
The concepts are a wee bit different, but it's the smells and the tastes all the same.
The company has produced a run of over 500 bottles of whisky named after Yates, which is a nice tribute for the efforts that he and his family have put into the distilling business over the years.
My whole family worked for Wilson Distillers way back in the heyday. My mother was a tea lady and also a bottler. My stepfather was the head engineer. My sister worked on the malting plant, making malt extract. I had 2 stepbrothers who worked over in the malting plant.
In Dunedin, the South Today.
Still to come on Southern Newsweek, a new restorative justice program opens in Otago, and the Cardrona ski field opens despite a massive lack of snow, so see you soon. Thanks for staying with us. Low-level Dunedin offenders are being offered the opportunity to pay their debt to victims and the community through an iwi-led community process. A new scheme has been launched blending tikanga Māori with restorative justice practices.
Police and community leaders gathered at Dunedin's Otako Marae for the start of a new initiative that uses a community panel to deal with low-level offenders, rather than having them go through the courts.
The panel range from CEOs, retired people, social workers, business owners. We've even got a doctor, a psychologist, people that are just really genuinely interested in the community.
It's aimed at keeping people who are guilty of low-level offending, such as common assault, shoplifting, willful damage and disqualified driving, from clogging up the often impersonal courtrooms.
It helps a raft of things. It can help the participant who's offended, because for sometimes they've committed a harm but they don't have a voice, and to get their voice across to be able to talk to the victim, whether it be apologising or giving them reparation, but having a voice rather than going through the court where you genuinely don't have a voice.
Using Maori values, the Dunedin-based program is one of now 17 across the country, and despite its Maori roots, is available to people of all ethnicities to get their lives back on track.
It's definitely something that we've been doing for generations, and so this is natural. This is our passion, looking after our young people that come through, because they can make one mistake, but be able to fix that and to reduce the harm to the community. It's a really good kaupapa, and I'm really excited about our mahi that we're doing.
Offenders who appear before the panel must create a plan that includes actions they have to complete and conditions they must follow. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Despite insufficient snow for skiing and snowboarding, Cardrona Alpine Resort had a soft opening on Saturday. The ski field's gondolas were operating and restaurants were open for any sightseers who had travelled up from the foggy valley floor to enjoy the sunshine and even a little bit of early snow.
Due to insufficient snow, skiers and snowboarders weren't invited when Cardrona ski field opened to the public over the weekend, but people were still welcome to explore the field in the bright sunlight.
I'm from Brisbane, originally from Holland, came here to Cardrona to see some snow, but unfortunately there's not much snow yet.
Down on the valley floor around Wanaka, it was gloomy and overcast, thanks to an inversion layer that's been there for most of the week, making the trip up to Cardrona all the more positive for those working on the field.
Yeah, we've got a thick layer of valley fog down here called an inversion layer. I think it's been there for a solid week now, and it's sort of blocking the sun from reaching the town, so it's good to get up to Cardrona and get some sun, get some vitamin D.
I like the fog, and I like the fact that I have to work hard to see the sunlight. So I'm a big fan because, you know, if you climb up, you get the sun, and if you stay down, then you're sad. So get outside, do some exercise, and make yourself happy.
Yeah, when you're coming out of that blueness to the orangeness of the sun is great. Yeah, definitely a big change of mood.
Yeah, it's nice.
Cardrona is hoping to be open for skiers by this weekend and treble cone by the end of next week. In Wanaka, the South Today.
Venues across Dunedin rocked to the sounds of many bands last weekend. But the inaugural Music for the People Festival showcased a particularly broad cross-section of the city's musicians at two very different venues.
Dunedin surf punk legends Catharticus had the honour of opening up the Music for the People Music Festival on Friday night. The first of two shows was at Starter's Bar in North Dunedin and featured a wide cross-section of Dunedin-based musicians. Musician and event coordinator, known around town as Person Will, is pleased with how the weekend went.
It went really well, and all of the artists were really stoked. We're really stoked with being involved and getting to just be a part of that experience.
Following Friday's event, a show kicked off at St Paul's Anglican Cathedral in the Octagon, 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Musician and singing tutor Molly Devine was accompanied by Maddie Parkins-Craig on drums for their set on Friday. Mosgiel band Saurian were amongst Friday's generally more rockier lineup than Saturday's event.
And we are also searching for appropriate spaces to do this stuff, and so having it in the cathedral, it kind of makes a statement.
On Saturday, Abby Fleur was amongst a host of performers, making full use of the excellent acoustics in one of Dunedin's most historic buildings. Punters at St Paul were happy with how the day progressed, including the first person through the door who stayed for the whole show.
First here today, and it's been an absolutely fantastic day, best day ever. I'm just so grateful we could come, and we just want to keep music in Dunedin. It's been great.
Person Will hopes the event can inspire civic leaders to see live music as a priority for Dunedin.
We need performing spaces, but we also need rehearsal spaces which aren't at risk of getting shut down or pulled from underneath us because of more important developments in the CBD. Vibrancy is important, and the council has a responsibility to protect and grow that. as part of its governing roles.
He says there's some chance a Music for the People type festival will happen again in some way, shape or form. In Dunedin, the South Today.
And that wraps up this edition of Southern Newsweek. For the latest news from the Southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. Ka kite anō.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.